You're listening to CIA, Coffee, Intel, and Anxiety, a podcast from retired CIA officers Jeff and Pete. Drawing from decades in the intelligence world, they offer real stories, sharp analysis, and honest reflections on the pressure, decisions, and daily chaos that come with a life of secrets. Add coffee, a dry sense of humor, and a friendship forged under fire, and you've got a podcast like no other.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome again to another episode of CIA, Coffee, Intel, and Anxiety. I'm here with my good friend, Jeff. Jeff, how are you doing?
Living a dream here in Florida where it's 150 degrees outside.
Oh, but we got air conditioning, hopefully
Thank
until
goodness.
the storms come and then wipe out our electricity. But anyway, it's you got to pay the price, right?
Yes,
And we
sir.
lived in places in the world where we've had more hotter temperatures, less reliability of electricity and other things. So this is nothing to complain about. This is a
No, not
privilege.
complaining. You're right. I got the AC going. I don't look like I'm sweating. So yeah, we're golden here, brother.
Well, today I'm very excited about this episode because we're going to be talking about something that is at the heart of what Jeff and I have done during our entire career within the CIA. At the end of the day, we were case officers, and what do case officers do? They collect intelligence, and we cannot collect intelligence until we recruit sources. So we're going to talk about that specifically, and we're going to start talking about it today. It might run a couple more episodes, but we're going to speak about the asset recruitment cycle because regardless of the type of asset, I mean, there's going to be unique situations in every single case, but the actual recruitment cycle is a cycle of really defined and using a methodology that works. And so we're going to go through that. And just to give you kind of like an overhead, the cycle starts with identifying a target. Then it goes, we also refer to that as spotting a target. Then we go on to assessing the target. Will that target meet the needs of maybe having access to the information that we are looking for, or access to something else that maybe we need that's not information, maybe some type of support? Are they accessible to us? Can we get to them on a regular basis so that we can then move into the development of them as potential recruited sources? So we go through the development, and that's a whole nother process as well. And that leads us to, if everything is successful, it leads us to recruiting. And there's a lot of different issues to speak about when it comes to recruiting. Assuming that it's a successful recruitment, then we move on to the handling of this individual as a source or as a support asset. And that moves more into an overt relationship with this person to a clandestine relationship, which has a lot of different considerations that they need to be addressed. Then after we handle them for a period of time, it's very likely that we're going to turn that individual over to another officer. And there's reasons why we would turn that source, that asset over to somebody else. And we'll talk about those reasons. And then at the end of the day, pretty much when we go through the entire cycle, there's going to be a time when we're going to terminate the asset. And I don't mean terminate literally like terminate them. We mean finish the relationship. Sever the ties with them as far as the relationship. Everybody goes their separate ways, and there's reasons why. We'll talk about the considerations about why we would terminate somebody, and what needs to be incorporated into that termination plan. And then the whole cycle starts all over again. Okay, so Jeff, I think why don't we talk a little bit about how do we, we're looking for an asset, we have to define a requirement, right? So that's the starting point.
Yeah, so the starting point actually comes from policymakers and analysts because they're the ones that say, what about this topic? And then that's the policymaker, the president, the vice president, whomever. And then the analyst will say, well, we don't have an answer to that question, but we will go to our field officers and have them collect on that. That's where you start identifying the targets because frequently the analysts will say, we want to know this information about the nuclear development program in pick a country. So then we would look at those industries and they would find individuals that they believe would have access to the intelligence. That's one of the key factors that I think we need to make sure everybody understands. We don't just go recruit people. We recruit people for a specific purpose that have access to specific intelligence. That's what starts the system. And we guys like Pete and we depend very heavily on the analytical team back at the headquarters area to make sure that we're collecting the intelligence that the policymakers require, because that's our job.
So most of the assets that we recruit are going to be responding to intelligence requirements, but there is a significant body of assets that are going to be recruited to provide support
True.
to our mission. And that could be a whole variety of ones that provide, let me say, they will need to procure equipment, maybe cell phones, cars, trucks, or other equipment that is not attributable to the U.S. government. The CIA is going to want to be able to recruit these individuals and give them funding to go out and procure these things that have shown no, and try to protect that it has any sort of connection with the U.S. government. And there are a few other examples, I think, of support assets. There's also safe houses. We'll talk more about safe houses in the future because that's one of the venues where we might be meeting with a FI source, and so we'll talk about safe houses and how those are procured. The one that procures it typically is going to be a support asset. We might even use support assets to make media placements, and if we have a media influence campaign, we might use sources to support assets to do that. Or maybe, one of those that kind of like ties into maybe how do we identify targets and how do we get to targets is actually there's been cases where you might have a support asset who is a social butterfly, and we have them organize events and invite people to the events that might be of interest to us. Maybe there's only a couple of people that are really of interest to us, but they'll invite maybe 100 people, and in amongst those people that are there, a couple of them might be high priority targets for us, and we got an opportunity then at that particular event to actually brush up against them and start a conversation. But there's a lot of other ways to identify
Let's
targets.
follow that in a little bit. So what you'll have is the embassy might have a cocktail reception, or you might, as a businessman, be hosting some kind of event or working with someone that hosts the event. And we make sure that the specific people are invited to that event. And then the operational officers, intelligence officers are at that event. And then they go ahead and they make contact in a completely explainable way. Oh, hi, my name's George, and nice to meet you. And what do you do? And then that's how you begin the relationship.
Yeah. Well, one of the main things that I used in my career, and I think probably you did too, I mean, is using particular venues that are very opportunistic to meet people. You might already know that person's going to be there, or that the organization that's of interest to us is going to send somebody to that particular event. But conferences and trade shows, we've been to zillions of these, right? And that's probably something to think about from a counterintelligence standpoint. If any of our listeners are going to be attending, if they're working for a organization of potential interest to, a foreign intelligence service, a criminal group, or a competitor, if you're going to a trade conference, I mean, it's a possibility you could be targeted there.
Absolutely. And you talked about the support assets as well, trying to set all that up and helping get the introductions that they have so we can meet the people we need to meet. In addition to that, I gotta say, you never know as an intelligence officer where you're going to meet the next asset, the next great recruitment. I can recall very specifically my two daughters going to Girl Scouts with another gentleman's two daughters, and we had no idea. But the daughters became friends, and then the parents became friends, and that led to some very, very good collection for where I was at the time. And it was by chance, But again, what operations officers do, there's no such thing as a by chance to an operations officer. We're looking under every rock that we come across, and we're looking at every person for an opportunity. That person may not have it, but they may know somebody who does. And so that's what intelligence officers do. We're always looking for the next recruitment. We're always looking for the the next great asset.
I had a utilization or benefits of the family being overseas is one time I came back from work and my first thing my wife said, I found somebody for you. And I said, well, what do you mean? She said, I found somebody for you. And she was so excited. And actually she did because it was an event where she and other spouses, in that country, locals, got together. And the person that hosted the event actually was the wife of a senior military official in that country. And so I said, wow, that's fantastic. So we arranged in the future to get together as a couple, go out, and it was great. We had a fantastic relationship we built and eventually it led to a recruitment. So yeah, you never know where these things can lead.
Yeah, that's
What
what the
about
Girl Scout thing did. That led to a recruitment again with the military source, because their dad was a military officer. And again, you're getting together with the kids, having a family barbecue, whatever, and then the relationship builds.
Well, we have like targets of opportunity, right? That you might not be out there looking specifically for that individual, but all of a sudden that individual is crossing your screen and you say, hey, this could be a great opportunity. I had it's the first place I went to, and I had to order my car because it was a mess. I had to place an order, a vehicle. It took about 3 months to get it. And finally, it was the second day that I got this vehicle, and I'm driving in the country on a major boulevard, and then all of a sudden there was a stoplight. I stopped, and 2 seconds later, boom, from behind, his car hit me from behind. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, it's a brand new car, and I'm already got hit. And I get out of the car, and it was the person in the car behind me, a young lady, and she was just so nervous. She actually got out of the car, left her car running, and she was so apologetic. She said right away, "It's my fault. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Da, 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 da. And it turned out that she was the niece of a major political figure in that country. And so when we exchanged information, and she said she'd take care of it, and she said, anything you need from me. And I said, hey, I want to, one thing that I could really appreciate in addition to paying for my damaged car, I want an introduction to your uncle. I'm so impressed with your uncle, and I would love the opportunity to actually meet him. So it was set up, and I was invited to his offices, and we had a nice long chat there, and so that was the beginning of something that just happened to be that car accident. The funny thing is, when she went back to her car, she was so nervous. I mentioned she left her car running. She left her doors locked. So I don't even know how I had to go on to a meeting. I don't know how she got that car open, but man.
Yep, the things we run into. But like you said, you never know where a potential asset's going to come from. And operations officers have their eyes and ears open all the time because you just never really know. It could land in your lap. And if you're not paying attention, and I've known officers like that, they'll get away from them because they're not focused. So we have to stay focused.
I remember a case. I mean, could we do a lot of direct targeting as well? We identify somebody and say, wow, it would be great to be able to figure out some way to get in contact, or try to get into, we call it trying to get into their circle, right? We might know what their pattern of life is, where they hang out. I mean, there were times when they said this particular guy is a target. We know he hangs out every Saturday. He's at this cafe, and he reads the newspaper there. And so we might try to go to that particular location and maybe sit next to them. Maybe, maybe not speak with them the first time, but you were there, and maybe just acknowledge, say hi, and after a period of time, you start up a conversation. We kind of consider we call these bumps, where we just kind of casually, we're targeting this individual. They don't know it, but it looks like it's a casual conversation that we'll start up. And I've had quite a few of those, but sometimes we might even look at, this is an example of a particular organization. It was actually a central bank in a particular country that we were interested in penetrating. And I saw that one of the local banking associations had a course that they were putting on, and it so happened that one of those officials from the central bank was teaching the course. So I signed up for the course, and it was like a 7 week, once a week, 7 week course. And you know how these things are. A lot of the people are going to arrive, the students, attendees are going to arrive right on time or even late. I decided, well, let me arrive 15 minutes early or 20 minutes early because I know the instructor, having been an instructor or presenter, I know that you arrive, you know, in advance because you're going to be setting everything up, testing everything up. So it allowed me to start up a conversation with him. And that started out great. And every time we had a break, I would continue the conversation. And then maybe the following week I would arrive a little early. So it was a very natural way to really make turn out to be like starting a friendship with an individual who I knew would be a high priority target. Just seeing his name advertises him going to be presenting at these particular events.
You just never know when it's going to happen and or how it's going to land in your lap. I mean, I was a little bit more targeted from a technology perspective. So they knew where they wanted to send me and they knew what I was going after. And so I tended to focus on that. Because of my employer, I had good connections to get to those people. So then it just became a matter of getting to the right person. How does an operations officer use their cover to connect with the right person? Because I know we got away when I think you and I started, our covers were generic. And I was selling irrigation equipment. Not much interest in that from a intelligence perspective. However, by the time you and I retired, they had shifted it over so that our work was exactly related to the people we should be targeting, which made our jobs easier.
Mhm.
So that made it much easier for what I was doing, uh, where I was traveling in the Middle East to get some of those people. Funny story on that. One of the countries on the Saudi Peninsula, I was at their telecom headquarters, and yeah, I've been going there a couple times. Things are going great. Things are going swimmingly. And I bumped into this other American guy who was there, and he's also a businessman trying to do business. And I bumped into him once or twice there, not very often. And sure enough, guess who he worked for? I bumped into him in the office back in headquarters. So apparently he knew I was there, but I did not know he was there. So it's like, yeah, you people, what's the matter with you? Anyway, those are some of the fun things we go through.
I was a bit of, Occasionally I was a bit of a mercenary. Let me explain this. There was a particular fraternity where I thought becoming a member of this fraternity was going to really open up a lot of different connections to people that could be targets of interest. Even though I was not personally interested in this fraternity, I was curious, but I decided I actually went to the location where they hold their meetings, and someone showed me around and explained to me how this all works. And they said, you're basically welcome to join a meeting to meet a few of these people, and eventually you're going to go through these process of becoming a member, and part of that process would entail getting a mentor from the fraternity who you would meet with on an occasional basis. And when this individual who was showing me around started telling me some of the members, one of them that he explained to me, I said, whoa, that would be an awesome target. So I finagled my way to actually be able to request that individual, that target, would become my mentor. So it was just, I mean, it was fantastic in the sense of being able to have these one-on-one meetings and really get to know this individual well, and for him to get to know me and a very natural, way. Because a lot of times when we're meeting with our potential sources, we can't, we can't go out there and pitch them. We can't even explain why we might be interested in really, someday signing them up. It has to be very, guys, of something that becomes kind of social. We're meeting them on a social nature. We have interests in common. So, and that takes time. We got to be able to sustain that social relationship for not just like a couple days or weeks,
No,
months. So that becomes, part of the whole stage of being able to get to know them well. And so that particular example was really good for me. I think another thing that we can be another way to meet people where is asking for referrals. Let's say that we meet somebody that who would not be a target in their own way, but we know that they have access to people in their organization or their association or their family. And so we ask, can you provide a recommendation? Can you introduce me? And what's really nice about those we call introductions or referrals, if we approach that person who we're interested in based on that referral, that person's going to feel that have an obligation to at least sit down and meet with us instead of saying, "No, I don't have time for you," because they've been referred to us. And if they say no, they're kind of like they could be burning some bridges. So referral, even if you make these referrals up, I've done this a number of times. Say so and so recommended me. Oh, okay, and hope that they don't actually check on that, but it works, right?
Absolutely. That's a great way to do it.
Mhm. Then what, Jeff? What are we going to go on to? We identified somebody, but how do we?
Once we've identified them, and the important part is, being good headquarters weenies that we were, we have to verify that their access is of interest to the people back home. Because we might meet the best guy in the world and we may think that he's got the golden calf, but if the headquarters folks don't agree with us, they're going to wave you off. And I'm sure you were waved off, I've been waved off, but it's part of the team concept that isn't always made clear, but we are in fact a team. We're the end overseas that gets to have all the fun, and the analysts back home, they're the ones that have to process everything and give us the nod or point us in one direction or the other. However, once we get that nod, then the real fun begins. You have to begin to assess that person. Do they have access? Number one. Do they have vulnerabilities? Number two, what motivations might they have? And then you go from there, and this requires a personal relationship. Now, everybody that I met, I always met them in the business sense. So, whether I was selling irrigation equipment or latex glove manufacturing facilities or whatever the telecommunications networks. It was always a commercial setting. So I'm meeting as a businessman, so they know me as a business person. And then once we get to know them, and the folks back at headquarters say, yes, this person seems to have access, then we begin the assessment and development process. What makes this person tick? Does this person want to be my friend? Because if they're not your friend, you're probably not going to be able to recruit them. So you have to move it to a friendship level. It goes to the next level of relationships. And then you do that. While you're doing that, again, you're constantly assessing, you're constantly writing reports, you're getting tasking. And each time you meet, you're going to ask just a little bit tougher question, just a wee bit more sensitive. I got a funny story that I'm going to put out here. I remember it was a long time ago, but I remember it. I had commercially recruited this one gentleman, military officer, and I've gotten some taskings from back at the headquarters. And so I asked him about air defense. Oh my goodness. He came unglued. He's coming after me. Why do you want to know that? That's very sensitive information. Why are you asking that? Why do they want to know this? Who are you really working for? And I'm getting the full frontal attack. And what are you going to do in that situation? Well, you do what all case officers do. We lie, we shuffle, we backstep, we dance. I managed to tap dance my way around that, and the relationship survived. He never really did answer those questions. He answered a lot of other questions. And maybe the guy that took him up from me got him to answer those questions before he retired. But yeah, you got to be ready to do the two-step. You're dancing forwards, backwards. It doesn't always go the way you want it to. And this is one of the things, believe it or not, the training, I know we're going to talk about that in a bit, the training that we go through, where the instructors slash role players are doing things. It's just like they just want to mess with us. That's what we're thinking while we're going through the training. He's just trying to yank my chain. And no, he's trying to get me to develop an ability to think on my feet.
Oh, yeah.
Because when you get jammed up like I was jammed up with this guy, if you can't think on your feet, you're hosed. What are you gonna do? Get up and walk out? No, you got to figure out, you got to think your way and talk your way through it.
One of the challenges that I always could plan for meetings, and we'll talk about elicitation in the future, but you're trying to get additional information on the individual, where they work, and you kind of like plan out in advance. What are the things I'm going to try to get them to talk about? And that's not so hard, but the thing that's more difficult sometimes is remembering what they told you, so that when you're done with that meeting, going back and be able to write a really detailed cable without, missing things. And so, because you can't always be like, maybe there's times and you can say, hey, do you mind if I take a note on this? And depending on the circumstances, they might, but it seems kind of weird if you're developing this sort of social relationship with them, while you're taking notes, maybe have something to do with business or whatever, that the nature of what that individual does. So when sometimes what I do is then look at when can I take notes? Maybe I'm going to the restroom and I can just jot down some notes. And what we do a lot of time are these little note cards that everybody that works for us has those in their pocket. We pull those out. But what happened is this guy went to the restroom and I was like jotting down all kinds of notes. And I don't know what happened. He seemed like he came back pretty quick. And all of a sudden he looks at me, what are you doing? And that caught me by surprise. But then I said, I'm doing my what to do list. I got these things that my wife wanted me to take care of. I'm writing all these things down so I don't forget it. Because man, if I don't take care of these things, I'm going to hear about it forever. So we just both laughed, right? You got to come back with kind of response because, he did catch me in a kind of a compromising situation of writing notes down about him that I needed to remember.
Right. This is all part of the assessment process that we have to get through because we do have to send all this back into headquarters. They do have to approve all of this as we're going through the developmental process. They have to agree with that's the access that we're interested in, the vulnerabilities, how much we're going to pay them, et cetera, et cetera. So they do have to do all of that, and we do that as part of the assessment process early on. And then we get into the developmental process, which is basically the assessment process extended over several weeks, months, depending on the situation, years, possibly, where you develop a very personal relationship with the guy, where, at this point in the relationship, chances are families are going to be involved just because it takes it to that next level of personal meeting. And so my family was lucky to travel to some fun places with me while I was doing this and putting them to work. So that worked out to the positive, but it's also developing rapport. You have to have a relationship so that you can ask the hard questions. I didn't have the relationship that I should have had or needed to ask the question of that one gentleman who came after me. That's okay. Lots of times you don't know until you find out. That's why you're always pushing a relationship. How far will it go? With another gentleman that I had recruited, I think I mentioned, we talked about gifts where I gave this guy a really nice silver tray. He took one look at it and put it down and said, okay, let's get to work. He was all about information. He was all about the work. Not sure he knew who he was talking to or working for. I'm pretty sure he thought there was more to my story than I was telling him.
This is kind of the challenge that we have as officers is developing that relationship, that extended relationship, because typically if you want to meet with somebody for the first time, usually there's a reason for that, and yeah, maybe you decide you want to play golf or something, but usually you're meeting with somebody following up from a conference or something, and so they're thinking, well, it's going to be a one-time meet, and then it's going to go on to some specific business or some specific project. But we can't do that. We can't offer them anything, until after several months probably. And so we need to have that time to develop that relationship. We got to find things that they like to do that we can do together. And that might even include some things that we have no interest at all. Maybe we don't have any interest in, let's say, I don't know, Renaissance or classical music, but that person just loves it. So we decided, we're going to get together and go to see the orchestra, or have, go to a place where we can sip cognac and listen. Or maybe they love cognac and cigars. And so we take on drinking cognac and cigars because we know that's what they love. And so we have to really feed into it. That's
Yep.
really crucial, as you mentioned earlier, Jeff mentioned earlier. earlier, is developing, it's not only getting additional assessment information, but developing that personal rapport, because with that personal rapport comes trust. And as you hear a little bit later when we get into the recruitment, I mean, it's based so much, the number one reason probably that they're going to accept a recruitment pitch is going to be the trust they have in us, the recruiting officer. There are other reasons, there's motivations and vulnerabilities, reason while they'll accept a recruitment, but it's going to be the most important reason is going to be the trust that we've developed with them. Would you agree?
I agree 100%, and that will all feed into the recruitment process, which we will talk about at our very next session. So for today, I want to reiterate the fact that if you want to hire Pete and I, we both continue to work with companies to enhance their security and their activities. You can contact us at the information located below in the information box. So with that, everybody, I hope you have a great day, and we look forward to your comments too. Please send comments, got questions, ask us. We'll tell you. You can tell we're not shy. And with that, everybody have a great day.
Take care now. Till next time.